All right, I've opened many synth boxes over the years, but none have made me this hyped. The Prophet 5 and Prophet 10 by extension are quite possibly the most legendary synths ever made. Either the Prophet 5 or the Mini Moog Model D, in my humble opinion, maybe the CS80. Those are the three big ones, for me personally at least. Let me know in the comments what you think. Ruffles, what's your favorite synthesizer? This guy doesn't care, he just likes whatever new box is around. Ruffles, we know everybody on the channel loves you, but you gotta go, okay? Say bye, Ruffles. Oh. Wow. There's some synths that I get for the channel. This is a synth I'm getting for myself. Ever since I first played a Prophet 5 many, many years ago at a recording studio, I've always been blown away. And anytime I'm by a music store, I'll always stop by and play one. I have to say, guys, this feels pretty surreal to have my own Prophet 5, Prophet 10 in this case, right in front of me. Let's get this plastic off. Wow. I honestly can't believe this is in my studio right now. All right, well, here we are with my first time playing the beautiful Prophet 10 Special Edition. Except it's not actually my first time playing the synth, because when I plugged it in to film this first impressions video, it was incredibly out of tune. Like, we are talking comically out of tune to the point where I actually had to just keep tuning this synth over and over again for it to get used to my room over literally a week. I think the synth really just did not like moving from warm California weather to Canadian winter. But just keep that in mind if you get one of these. You're probably gonna have to tune it for a few days straight to get it used to your room if you live in a cold climate like I do. All right, well, that beautiful patch you heard me playing earlier might be the single greatest intro preset I've heard on a synth. It just has so much vibing character, and you were hearing it through the Maracai delay, which I will re-enable. But let's start off by starting with an initialized preset. Let me see if I can remember how to do this. There we go. And we're just gonna go ahead and have fun and play around with the synths panel today and see what we can make. So initialized preset is a standard sawtooth wave. You'll notice it's really dark. An interesting quirk I found about the Prophet 10 is that the envelope amount needs to be up for the synth to be as bright as it, probably should be. I don't know if that's an interesting design choice. Someone in the comments let me know if the original Prophets were like that. I'm assuming they were. But yeah, without anything, it's a very, very dark synth. So I think for the purpose of just going through the oscillators, I'm gonna leave the envelope up here. Another quirk of the synth is how the release works. So if we have the release enabled, it's just like any other synth where it'll work with the ADSR. But if we have the release disabled and we have a sustain pedal plugged in, it does the whole piano thing, which I really like, where the sustain pedal engaging will make the release ring out. My God, that is a beautiful sounding initialized sawtooth patch. Just to show you how much character this synth has, there's no vintage knob whatsoever. This is fully stock saw wave with just a bit of release. Let's play in a different key. Like, there's so much character, and that is as tame as we can make it if we start to add the vintage knob. Guys, that is one oscillator with nothing, no filter, nothing, and it's on the filter that I like less, the Prophet Rev 3 filter. let's start to play around with some other oscillator shapes. So we can actually add the two oscillators together, which is really cool. Really enjoy that. It makes a huge volume boost, but it allows for some really great pulse width modulation sounds. Like one of my, issues with pulse width modulation sometimes, although we all love it, is that if you have a sound that you want that really big wide, it can really thin out the sound. So the fact that Prophet, you can pretty much just get away with that by having both waveforms stacked, and it doesn't do the weird phasey thing that it does on the OBX8. So let's send our pulse width modulation. Like without it. Really nice, but it's a really thin and phasey like the standard PWM sound is. Here we're almost able to get like a dual oscillator sound like this, right? Really cool, right? Let's go ahead and mix in oscillator 2. We'll turn off pulse width for now just so we can hear the beautiful oscillators. Oh, probably got to enable one of the shapes, right? Although this isn't my first time using the synth, it's still really new for me. I only have used this like one other time once it started working. So forgive me if I miss stuff. That'll be in the deep dive. Yeah. I mean, come on. Again, this is like sound design on easy mode. These are just two sawtooth waves. I think that the fact that the Prophet 5 is so simple, again, if they hadn't have nailed the sound and made it sound this ridiculously good, there would be no point to this synth because this is one of the simplest synths and you get the least amount of synth for the money. It's a mono output. There's no stereo field. There's no real fancy modulation matrix, but the sound is just unbelievable. We'll get into some of the cool stuff in a second, but let's listen to the filters. So we've got two filters basically. I will turn, I'll just start with this. So the Prophet Rev 3 one, which is the stock one when you initialize, is I believe a Curtis chip filter. It's like really nice. You really lose a lot of bass. But where the magic of this synth is, and I find myself reaching for this like 90% of the time, is the Prophet 1/2 filter, which I believe is an SSM SSI filter. Let's go back to back here. Let's fully open it. You'll actually hear there's like a huge difference. So Prophet Rev 3. Somebody in the comments let me know what the main difference is. I'm absolutely going to research this for the deep dive, but my initial musician thoughts, I feel like the Rev 1/2 is more bass heavy, more high-end heavy, and less mid-range heavy, and a bit more aggressive. The Rev 3 is more like mid-range and low-mid heavy, and a bit more like brassy almost. They're both great, but yeah, the Prophet 1/2 filter is just so special. Like, wow, gorgeous. Okay, let's go back to what we were doing. Let's make some string sounds. I love the Prophet strings. to turn up our volume a little bit. We don't need a sustain pedal. Let's have that release ring out. We're clipping. It's a super dynamically loud synth because you've got this insanely loud master volume that you start to turn up when the resonance goes down, but then adding each of the waveforms creates a ton more volume too. Beautiful, right? We'll add in keyboard tracking. I think that for these older style synths, Prophets and OBs, keyboard tracking is really necessary. That's my hot take. To achieve a lot of what people perceive as the vintage sound, keyboard tracking, I don't know why, but a lot of modern synths, they don't have it on by default, whereas a lot of these older Prophets, OB style synths, I guess because a lot of the presets were trying to replicate acoustic instruments, they really go for that like keyboard track sound. It's so beautiful. I could just listen to this all day. It's gorgeous. But let's go and check out some of the more unique sides of the Prophet. So we've got our polymod section, which I absolutely love synths with polymod. It reminds me of modular synthesis, but on a polyphonic synthesizer. And there's just something different about using an oscillator as a modulation source versus an LFO, which oftentimes are digital. So pop this into triangle mode. LFO mode. Bring it out of the mix. We'll replace it with some noise. And let's send that to the pulse width so we can free up our LFO. Yeah, there's just like a mid-range boost in the Rev 3 filter, which makes it sound louder, but it's not as pleasing to me. Like, what? It's such a good sound. How about we do filter instead? Beautiful. And then if we take it out of low frequency mode, we can get those awesome audio rate, modulation, FM sounds. Get almost like noise mod. This is a great time to show what is one of my favorite features about the Rev 4 version of the Prophet 5 and 10, which is the poly unison mode. When I discovered this, I was blown away. It's just so fast. So now we've split our Prophet into 2 Prophet 5s, so 5 and 5, so we only get 5 voices, but we just basically dual all the oscillators. So basically, it's not fully binaural, which this can do by timbrality, but not binaural because it's not stereo. But you're basically just thickening up. So the main thing with polymod is you lose your oscillator 2, oscillator B, which can make it a bit thin. But now we have literally 2 copies of both the oscillator, the carrier, and the modulator. Detune the vintage mode. So cool, right? We haven't even used the LFO. So for a simple synth, there's a surprising amount of timbral variety. So now, for example, if we wanted to have that classic vibrato sound, a little bit of FM. I really don't mind the voice stealing. It's kind of quirky and nice, and man, it sounds so fat. Like if we take off unison, so with unison, without unison, it's really nice, but it's just a much simpler sound. Switch to the Rev 3 filter. Works really well for this sound, actually. One of the coolest features of the Prophet 5 and 10 that I haven't really experimented much with for my patches, which I haven't started on yet, again, I just got this thing, but I love that I'm a huge fan of noise mod if you've watched my previous videos on synth tips, and they just have noise mod. So no need for a mod matrix. You just basically, the only trade-off is you kind of have to balance between your LFO, so it's not totally crazy. So to me, this is like having two LFOs, right? You have a noise LFO and a regular LFO, and you just have to be clever with balancing between what you want with them. You can't, unfortunately, obviously, send them to different things. But look at that, we're balancing it. We're like, we just want a little bit of noise mod and vibrato. liking how that's sounding. Let's wrap things up with a bit of a jam. I'm gonna re-enable the Maracai. All right, well, that is where I will wrap up my first impressions today. If you know the channel, stay tuned. I'm gonna be doing a deep dive, full review once I've spent more time with the synth, as well as at least one, if not two, custom patch banks for the Prophet 5/10. So that brings me to a good question. Why do I even have a Prophet 10? Didn't I just get the UDO Super Gemini? What's going on here? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, for pragmatic reasons, the Prophet 6 patch bank I did is actually by far my highest selling patch bank and really helped to keep this channel funded and give me the faith to keep going. So thank you so much if you're one of the many people who bought my Prophet 6 patch bank. So I've gotten tons of requests to do the same thing for the Prophet 5. Secondly, while I always want to keep this channel apolitical, a certain president of the United States has implemented sweeping tariffs across the board on my country of Canada, which is maybe not the nicest thing to do to your long-term ally of many, many years. So things are most likely about to get a lot more expensive, including synthesizers, which are not exempt from those tariffs. So I was able to grab one direct from Sequential at a great price. Thank you so much to Sequential, really appreciate that. And I figured this is probably the last chance for a long time for me to get any US made synthesizers into my studio. So we'll see what happens in the future, but I figured it was now or never to add this synth to my collection, to make some patches for it, to make a review, which I've been getting a lot of requests for. So let's wrap up with just a couple first impressions about the Prophet 10 Special Edition. Well, as I mentioned in that sort of beginning of the jam, I had a massive issue with tuning, which is hilarious. I shouldn't say issue, because they warn you in the manual that this could happen, but I've never had a synth that was more temperamental to temperature other than maybe the Korg Prologue when it first came out in 2019. But lo and behold, just like Sequential says, after a couple days, it got used to the temperature in my room and it's been rock solid since. But I think that's a really good sign of it's fully VCO based analog circuitry and there's no digital oscillators hiding in there. The trade-off of that is while it was a little temperamental, this is by far the most wild sounding, most vintage sounding synth that I've ever owned. The only two synths that have a similar kind of wildness to the oscillators that I've heard are the GS Music E7 and the OBX8 behind me, where you can kind of just get away with playing a fully dry sawtooth patch or square wave patch, and the natural phasing and little imperfections make it sound interesting enough that you don't have to use any vintage knob and whatnot. I owned a Prophet 6 for years, and it's actually one of the few synths that I really regret selling because it just fit into the mix of really anything I worked on so well. I haven't had a chance to use the Prophet 10 in the mix, but I'm curious if it'll be the same because of just how easy to make sounds that sound usable and interesting and good. I'm really loving how the Prophet 10, it's just what you see is what you get. There's no hidden settings and nothing whatsoever. Final thing about the sound, I'm just early using it obviously, but I think this is probably the nicest sounding cross modulation and analog FM I've ever heard on a synth. It's kind of hard to describe, but it sounds really organic, almost like a instrument. I don't know if that's just a placebo because it has wood on it versus metal, but it feels like when I'm making FM sounds and kind of doing cross mod, things sort of like they stay organic and stay within a realm of something that would be actually usable, even if it's really atonal sounds. Whereas on some synths, including the Prophet 6, the cross mod, I had to work a little bit more to get it where it was at. But that's where I'll wrap it up for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned if you do have a Prophet 5 or 10 for my custom patch bank within the next month or so, and then the deep dive after that. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Devin Belanger, and I will see you in the next video.